The wallet hit the wet pavement first. Then came the scream of tires, the blast of a car horn, and a man in a soaked overcoat lunging backward, just in time to avoid being flattened by a taxi that never should have swerved that close to the curb. Rain hammered down over the train station square, turning the pavement into a sheet of black glass, and in the chaos of the near accident, nobody noticed the leather wallet that had slipped from the man's coat pocket and landed inches from a drain grate, cash spilling halfway out of it. Nobody except a 12-year-old boy standing under a torn plastic tarp, with a crate of bottled water at his feet. Noah Carter didn't move at first. He just stared. Water was pouring off the edge of his tarp in a steady curtain, and beyond it the wallet sat there glistening, fat with bills, practically begging to be picked up. He had exactly $4.30 in his pocket, earned over 6 hours of standing in this exact spot shouting cold water $1 to commuters who mostly ignored him. His mother's medicine cost $12 a bottle. He was short. He was always short. The man in the overcoat didn't seem to notice his wallet was gone. He staggered to his feet, dazed from the near miss, brushed off his coat, and limped away into the station without looking back once. Noah's heart pounded. He could take it, nobody would know, nobody was watching. He sprinted out from under the tarp, water splashing up his ankles, and scooped up the wallet in one motion. Then turned and ran directly toward the station entrance, shouting at the top of his lungs, Sir, wait, you dropped something." The man didn't hear him over the noise of the crowd and the rain. Noah kept running, dodging umbrellas, weaving between briefcases and rolling suitcases, water sloshing in his worn-out sneakers, until he finally caught up and grabbed the sleeve of the man's overcoat. "Sir, your wallet, you dropped it back there." The man turned around slowly, and that's when everything changed. Because the man standing in front of Noah, soaked to the bone, disguised in an old coat that didn't fit quite right, was not just any man. He was Charles Whitmore, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the entire country, and he hadn't dropped that wallet by accident. He dropped it on purpose. If you're already hooked, hit that like button right now, because what happens next is going to change how you see people forever. And make sure you're subscribed, because this story only gets more emotional from here. Charles stared down at the boy for a long moment, rain dripping from his gray hair, his disguise nearly blown by his own shock. He hadn't expected this. He'd expected the wallet to vanish the second his back was turned. That was the whole point of the test. He'd been planning this for weeks, dressing down, hiring a driver who knew to keep quiet, choosing this exact spot because his advisors told him it was one of the poorest, most desperate corners of the city. He wanted to see, once and for all, whether a single honest person still existed in a world that had convinced him otherwise. Instead, a boy who looked like he hadn't eaten a full meal in days was standing in the pouring rain, holding out a wallet stuffed with more cash than he'd probably ever seen in his life. You're giving this back?" Charles asked, testing him, keeping his voice rough and unfamiliar. "It's not mine, sir," Noah said simply, water dripping off his chin. "You'd want it back if you dropped it, right?" Charles took the wallet slowly, flipping it open. Every bill was still there, not a single note missing. "Most people would have kept this," Charles said. Noah shrugged, shivering. "Then most people are wrong." He turned to jog back toward his cart of water bottles before the rain ruined the rest of his stock, but Charles's hand caught his shoulder. "Wait, what's your name, son?" Noah Carter." "Noah," Charles repeated, like he was trying to memorize the sound of it. "Do you live near here?" "Couple blocks with my mom." Is she home right now?" Noah hesitated, suspicion flickering behind his tired eyes. Strangers didn't usually ask this many questions. She's sick. She doesn't leave much. Something shifted in Charles's expression, something that looked almost like grief. He glanced down at the wallet in his hands, then back at the boy standing in front of him, drenched and shaking and completely unaware that he was talking to a man worth more money than most countries' national budgets. "Thank you, Noah," Charles said quietly. "You have no idea what you just did." Noah just nodded awkwardly and ran back to his cart, because the rain was ruining his water bottles, and ruined water bottles meant no dinner tonight. Charles stood there in the downpour for a long time after the boy disappeared into the crowd, the wallet clutched tight in his hand, his mind racing back 30 years to a woman who used to tell him, over and over, that character was the only inheritance that mattered. He hadn't believed anyone still lived by those words, until tonight. But Charles Whitmore did not become one of the richest men in the country by trusting first impressions. He built his empire by testing everything, every deal, every employee, every partner twice, sometimes 3 times before he ever placed his faith in it. A dropped wallet was one moment, one decision made in a matter of seconds under pressure. It proved nothing on its own. He needed to know if Noah Carter was consistent. If this was who the boy really was, day after day, when nobody was clapping, when nobody was watching, when there was no wallet dramatically waiting to be returned. So the very next morning, Charles called his driver. "Marcus," he said, still wrapped in a robe, staring out at the gray city skyline from the top floor of his penthouse. "I need you to find someone, quietly. No police, no lawyers, nothing official, just eyes." "Who are we looking for, sir?" "A boy named Noah Carter. Sells water outside the train station. I want to know everything about him, where he lives, who his family is, what he does every single day. And Marcus," Charles turned, his jaw tight, "he can never know he's being watched." For the next 2 weeks, Charles received daily reports, and what he learned nearly broke him. Noah's father had vanished when Noah was 7, walked out one night and never came back, leaving no note, no money, no explanation. His mother, Elena, had worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat until an illness took hold of her lungs and stole her ability to stand for more than a few minutes at a time. Since then, it had been Noah. Just Noah, 12 years old, waking up at 5 in the morning to sell water before school, rushing home after class to check on his mother, then heading back out to sell more water until the streets went dark. The investigators' photographs told their own story. Noah repairing his own shoes with tape and string because new ones cost money he didn't have. Noah skipping lunch so he could save the coins for evening medicine. Noah studying his homework by streetlight because the electricity in their apartment had been shut off twice that month already for unpaid bills. And then there were the other moments, the ones nobody had asked him to do. Noah chasing down a woman 2 blocks to return a phone she'd dropped, refusing the reward she tried to press into his hands. Noah carrying grocery bags up 4 flights of stairs for an elderly neighbor every single Tuesday, rain or shine, for what the investigator discovered had been going on for over a year. Noah stepping between 2 teenagers stealing lunch money from a smaller boy at his school, taking a shove to the chest for his trouble, and never once telling a teacher, because snitching gets you worse. Charles sat alone in his office one night, the file spread across his desk, and for the first time in years, he felt something crack open in his chest. "He has nothing," Charles whispered to the empty room, "and he still gives everything away." He thought about his own son, who hadn't called him in 4 months. He thought about his board members, who smiled to his face and undercut him in private. He thought about his ex-wife, who left when the money got bigger than the marriage. He thought about every version of loyalty he had bought over the years, every handshake sealed with a signing bonus, every friendship that evaporated the moment the check stopped. And then he thought about his mother, a woman who raised him in a two-room apartment with holes in the walls, who worked as a seamstress until her fingers bled, who used to sit him down every single night and say the same thing. Charles, money will come and go, but your character, that's the only thing that's truly yours. Guard it like your life depends on it, because someday it will. He hadn't thought about those words in years. He'd been too busy building, too busy winning. Somewhere along the way, success had convinced him that everyone had a price, that kindness was just a transaction waiting to happen, that the version of humanity his mother believed in simply didn't exist anymore. Noah Carter was proving him wrong every single day, and Charles needed to know just how far that honesty would go. If this story is moving you even a little, drop a comment below and tell me what you'd have done in Noah's shoes. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who need to hear it. 3 weeks after the wallet, Charles arranged the next test. Through an intermediary, a warehouse manager who had no idea who was really behind the request, Noah was offered a weekend job. Simple work: sorting inventory, loading boxes, cleaning the floor. $40 for 8 hours, more money than Noah had ever earned in a single day in his life. Noah showed up 20 minutes early on Saturday morning, hair combed, shirt tucked in, practically vibrating with excitement. $40 meant an entire bottle of his mother's medicine and groceries left over. He worked harder than anyone else on the floor, stacking boxes with a focus that made the other employees mutter about the new kid trying too hard. Charles watched from a security office upstairs, hidden behind one-way glass, his pulse quicker than he wanted to admit. At exactly 2 in the afternoon, during the lunch break, the plan Charles had spent days designing was set into motion. A briefcase, unlocked, containing $8,000 in cash, was accidentally left on a shelf near the break room. No cameras were visibly mounted nearby. 2 employees, quietly paid by Charles's people to test Noah without knowing the full truth of who was orchestrating it, wandered past the briefcase and noticed it first. "Yo, check this out," one of them said, elbowing his coworker. The other employee's eyes went wide at the sight of the cash. "Bro, nobody's around. Nobody would even know." Noah walked in at that exact moment to grab his water bottle from his backpack and froze at the sight of the 2 men, hovering over an open briefcase full of money. "What is that?" Noah asked. "Free money, kid," one of them said, grinning. "Somebody screwed up big time leaving this here. You want in? We split it 3 ways, nobody ever finds out." Noah stared at the briefcase. $8,000. He did the math in half a second, enough to pay off his mother's entire medical bill, enough to fix the electricity for a year, enough to buy real shoes, a real winter coat, actual groceries instead of whatever was cheapest that week. Upstairs, Charles leaned forward against the glass, his knuckles white. "Don't," he whispered under his breath. "Please, God, don't." Noah closed the briefcase. "This isn't ours," he said flatly. "Are you serious right now?" one of the men snapped. "Kid, this is literally free money. Nobody's gonna miss it." "Somebody's gonna miss it," Noah said. "Maybe not today, but somebody worked for this. It's not mine to take just because nobody's watching." He picked up the briefcase, walked straight to the warehouse manager's office, and set it down on the desk. "Found this by the break room. It's not locked and there's a lot of money in it. Thought you should know before somebody who isn't so honest finds it first." The manager, stunned, thanked him and promised to look into it. Noah went right back to sweeping the floor like nothing had happened, humming quietly to himself, completely unaware that upstairs, behind a pane of one-way glass, one of the richest men in the country had both hands pressed over his own face, shoulders shaking, tears streaming down for the first time in longer than he could remember. It wasn't the money that broke him. It was the fact that a 12-year-old boy with absolutely nothing had just proven that everything Charles believed about human nature, everything cynicism and 30 years of boardrooms and betrayals had taught him, was wrong. Charles didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study with the lights off, staring at an old photograph of his mother, and for the first time in years, he let himself cry without shame. The next morning, Charles knew what he had to do, but there was one more thing weighing on him, a question he needed answered before he could reveal himself. He needed to know Noah's honesty wasn't performance, that it wasn't something he did only for strangers he'd never see again. He needed to see what Noah did when the stakes were highest and the temptation was personal. So Charles arranged one final encounter. He would meet Noah again, this time not as a stranger with a dropped wallet, but as someone claiming to need real help. He returned to the same street corner 2 days later, dressed in the same worn coat, and approached Noah's water cart looking deliberately distressed. "Noah, right?" Charles said, playing the part of a desperate stranger. "I need your help. I lost my bag on the train, my medication is inside, I have a heart condition, and there's also cash in there, quite a lot of it. If you find it, there's a reward. A big one." He handed Noah a slip of paper with a phone number and walked away, watching from a distance as Noah tucked it into his pocket without a second thought. An hour later, Noah's phone, an old cracked model held together with tape, buzzed with a message from Charles's assistant, part of the arranged test. A bag matching the description had supposedly been found near the station, containing $3,000 and a bottle of prescription pills. Would Noah like to come collect the reward for returning it? Except there was a twist. The message specified that the finder, an actor working for Charles, was willing to simply give Noah the entire bag and split the cash. No questions asked, no owner ever needing to know. Nobody would trace it back. Nobody would come looking. It was, on paper, a victimless crime against a man who supposedly had a heart condition and desperately needed his medication back, sure, but who would also never know if a chunk of that cash disappeared first. Noah showed up at the meeting point behind the old bookstore exactly on time. The actor, a woman named Priya hired for the role, handed him the bag and made her offer. "Look, kid, nobody's gonna know. Take a few hundred for yourself. You clearly need it more than some rich guy who probably has 10 more where this came from." Noah opened the bag, saw the pills, saw the cash, and went quiet for a long moment. "He needs this medication," Noah finally said. "If I take money that's supposed to help him and something happens because he can't afford medical bills later, that's on me. I'm not doing that." "Kid, he'll never even notice," Priya pressed, sticking to the script Charles had written for her, testing him harder than he'd tested anyone before. $3,000. Your mom's sick, right? This could change everything for you." Noah's jaw tightened. His hands trembled slightly around the strap of the bag. For a moment, just a moment, Charles, watching from a car parked across the street, saw the internal war playing out across the boy's face. This was real conflict, not an easy decision. Noah desperately needed that money. Every fiber of his exhausted, 12-year-old body wanted to say yes. "I can't," Noah finally said, voice shaking. "I want to. God, I really want to, but I can't. Please just tell me how to get this back to him." Charles couldn't watch anymore. He stepped out of the car. "Noah." Noah turned, confused, then recognized the face beneath the hood. You're the man from the train station, with the wallet. There is no lost bag, Charles said gently, walking closer. There's no heart condition. This was a test, Noah, just like the wallet, just like the job at the warehouse. Noah's confusion deepened into something closer to fear. I don't understand. Did I do something wrong? No, Charles said, his voice breaking. You did everything right, every single time. He explained everything then. The wallet dropped on purpose weeks ago. The private investigator following his every move. The job arranged specifically to test him with an unlocked briefcase of cash. And now this final test, the hardest one of all, designed to see if Noah's honesty would hold even when the reward was disguised as a victimless choice. Noah stood frozen on the sidewalk, the empty bag still in his hands, tears welling in his eyes. Why? Why would you do all this to me? Because I stopped believing people like you exist, Charles said. I have more money than I know what to do with, Noah, and it made me trust no one. Every person in my life wanted something from me. Every deal had strings. I forgot that some people are just good, without needing a reason to be. I'm not special, Noah said quietly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I just don't want to be the reason something bad happens to somebody. That's all. That, Charles said, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, is exactly why you're the most important person I've met in 20 years. Noah didn't fully understand, not yet, not standing there on a rainy sidewalk with a stranger who'd apparently been secretly studying his every move for weeks. But something in Charles's eyes told him this wasn't a trick. This was a man who had been broken open, and somehow Noah had been the one to do it. If you've made it this far, comment the word honesty below. I want to see how many of you would have made the same choice Noah did, even when nobody was watching. The weeks that followed changed both of their lives completely. Charles arranged for Noah's mother, Elena, to be admitted to the best hospital in the city, covering every cost of a treatment plan doctors had told her was financially impossible before. Within a month, her breathing had improved enough that she could walk unassisted for the first time in over a year. She cried the first time she saw Noah walk through the door without exhaustion carved into every line of his face. Charles didn't stop there. He established the Noah Carter Scholarship Fund, guaranteeing full education, from that day through university, for any child in the city who could prove they'd shown extraordinary honesty and character despite hardship. He opened 3 community food centers in the poorest districts of the city, staffed partly by former employees who had once tried to tempt a 12-year-old boy into stealing, and had since asked, humbled, for a second chance to do right by him. He funded a medical assistance program specifically for families facing the same impossible choice Elena had once faced, medicine or dinner, never both. He also launched something he called the Youth Leadership Academy, a program built entirely around teaching children not business skills or test-taking strategies, but the very things Noah had shown him without ever being taught: integrity, compassion, and the quiet courage to do the right thing when nobody's applauding. Noah went back to school full-time. No more 6-hour shifts under a leaking tarp before sunrise, but he never stopped being Noah. He still walked his elderly neighbor's groceries up 4 flights of stairs every Tuesday. He still gave half his lunch away to classmates who needed it more, even when Charles quietly ensured he'd never go hungry again. Old habits, it turned out, weren't habits of poverty. They were simply who Noah was. Months later, on a cool evening with the sun beginning to set behind the skyline, Charles found himself walking back toward the same train station, the same park bench where all of this had truly begun. He sat down slowly, feeling every one of his 62 years settle into his bones, and watched the same crowd of commuters rush past, oblivious to the fact that a single decision on this bench had rewritten the course of two entirely different lives. Noah found him there, older now by only a few months but somehow standing taller, more sure of himself. Dressed in a clean uniform from the private school Charles had enrolled him in. "You didn't fall asleep this time," Noah said, sitting down beside him with a grin. "No tricks left," Charles said, smiling. "No wallets, no briefcases, no hidden actors with sad stories about heart medication." Noah laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that came easy now, unburdened. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching children play near the station fountain, their laughter echoing off the wet pavement just like it had on that rainy night months ago. "Can I ask you something?" Noah said eventually. "Anything." "Why me? Out of everyone in this whole city, why did you pick me for that first test?" Charles thought about it for a long moment. "Honestly, I didn't pick you, I picked a spot. A corner of the city my advisors told me was the poorest, most desperate place they knew, because I wanted to see if honesty could survive real hardship, not the comfortable kind rich people practice when it costs them nothing. I expected to find nobody. I expected the wallet to disappear in about 4 seconds. And instead you found me. And instead I found the proof my mother spent her whole life trying to teach me," Charles said quietly. "That character has nothing to do with what's in your pocket. It's about what's in here." He tapped his chest. Noah looked down at the old leather wallet Charles was turning over in his hands, the very same one from that first rainy night, still carried in his coat pocket all these months later, a reminder he refused to let go of. "What are you going to do with it now?" Noah asked, still testing people with it. Charles studied the wallet one last time, thought about every doubt it represented, every year of assuming the worst of people, every wall he'd built up around his own heart because he thought kindness always came with a price tag attached. Then he stood up, walked to the trash bin at the edge of the platform, and dropped it inside. "I don't need it anymore," Charles said, sitting back down. "I already found what I was looking for." Noah smiled, watching the last of the evening light stretch across the wet pavement. "Maybe money doesn't make people valuable," he said. "Maybe it just shows who they already were the whole time." Charles laughed, a real laugh, the kind he hadn't allowed himself in years, and put an arm around the boy who had, without ever meaning to, restored an old man's entire faith in humanity. They sat there together as the sun disappeared behind the skyline, two people from completely different worlds, bound now by something far more valuable than money ever could have been. If this story touched you even a little, please hit subscribe so you never miss the next one. Drop a like to help this reach someone who needs a reason to believe in people again. And leave a comment telling us what part hit you hardest. Stories like Noah's remind us that the greatest inheritance anyone can leave behind isn't money at all. It's character. And sometimes, all it takes is one honest person to remind the whole world that it still exists.